Hey everyone, welcome to All Techies. I'm Pankaj Rai, and in this tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to add Firebase Authentication to your app built with Jetpack Compose. Well, whenever you add login or the sign up screen, the biggest factor that comes in to both the places is that how do you authenticate the user? How do you are going to store the credentials provided by the user? If you are going ahead with, say, Google authentication or Facebook authentication, then it's straightforward. You have their SDK, you add the SDK and use the APIs. But how about if you have to provide a mechanism where they can create their account by providing their email ID or even phone number based authentication? For that, you will need a database where you can maintain these records. But now the question which comes up is that who is going to provide you those backend services? Is it like you can create on your own? But even if you want to create on your own, where do you are going to host this? How about the security? Because user credentials are very confidential information. You will really not want the user credentials to get leaked out because this is direct privacy concern. So last time, if you remember, we have created this login UI. If you haven't checked out that video, then I'll provide link in the description, and also on top you'll see a card. Click on the I button and then you can head over to that video too. So in that video, we just talked about how to create UI, but we haven't talked anything about how to make a genuine authentication process too. Well, all the infrastructure constraints that I have talked about, how about if you can bypass all those things and directly add the authentication mechanism without any overhead of security, maintaining infrastructure, backend, etc., etc. Well, the best thing is that Firebase provides this free of cost, and it provides the highly secured mechanism too. So you can really be rest assured that the user credentials will remain safe. So last time as we created the UI, now to the same UI, let's try to add Firebase authentication so as to let the genuine user to log into our app. For that, the first thing that we should do is to head over to the Firebase website. So let's check out the Firebase website first. Well, we are now on the Firebase website. console.firebase.google.com will take you to the Firebase console. At this place, we have an option to add project. Just click on that. And when you click that, the first step is to provide the name of your project. That's the place where you may provide the name of your application or some project name, because eventually inside this we are going to add our application. So let me name this as Auth demo. We also have an ability to change the unique identifier of this project. So for that, just tap on this and you can change these values. So instead of some random stuff, let me say this as auth demo stud. Done. Now click on continue. Next step is either you want to enable Google Analytics for your project or not. Well, do enable this, because when a project goes live, then if you have added the analytics SDK, then it gives you a very good amount of information without writing even a single line of code. For example, on which screen user is spending most of their time, your users are from which country, all those information you'll get by default if you add the SDK. So do enable the Google Analytics and click on continue. Here you may have to select the account, so click on that and select default account for Firebase. Finally, just click on create project. This will take a bit of time, so within 1 minute your project will be ready. The next step will be to add your application to this project. You can add multiple number of application to the same project. Not just this. Say for example, if I have to add Android and iOS application, then to the same project I can even do so. This is very convenient when you have an application which you are building for both Android, iOS, and even for the web. In all those cases, you do not need to create multiple projects. Single project, multiple apps. So this is done now. So let's click on continue. Now at this place, it provides us the console where it shows all the services offered by Firebase on the left side panel. So we can see the services listed down in build, release and monitor, analytics, and engage. Well, we'll come to this later on, but the first thing that we should do right now is to add our application. So for that, click on Android. So it supports iOS, Android, Web, Unity, and Flutter. Our concern right now is to have Android app added to this project. So let's click on Android. Once you click on this, it asks for a very basic details about the project. That's application ID. Application ID is something that you can fetch from build.gradle. So your package name is nothing but added with an application ID in build.gradle. Then nickname of this application, so that it will be easy for us to identify that this package name belongs to which app. So let me say this as login demo. And eventually, whenever you are dealing with authentication, it requires you to provide the SHA-1 key. After providing the SHA-1 key, click on register app. So basically we are done linking our application with Firebase through the console. Now what we have to do is download the Google service.json and paste it to the app level directory of your project. Now click on next. So these are the class paths that we need to add. So let me add the class path 2. But before that, let me head over to plugin, because I'm using the different version of Gradle. This is for the legacy based Gradle. What I have to do is I have to copy this plugin and paste it in build.gradle. Where the version will be 4.3.13. After that, let's add this plugin once again. Then let me add the dependencies too, and the analytics service. Click on next, then continue to console. Well, so far we have added our project on the Firebase console. Now the next thing that we have to do is, because we are interested in Firebase authentication, so click on build and authentication, click on get started. So Firebase provide all this sign-in mechanism. It supports email, password, phone, anonymous, Microsoft, Game Center, Google, Facebook, Apple, etc., etc. What we are so far interested in is to enable email and password based login and sign up. So tab on this. You can see that it's all disabled as of now. So let's enable this. So this is email and password based. And the second one is a passwordless sign-in. What it does is that whenever you try to authenticate the user, it sends an email link, and if user clicks on that, that itself gives a message back to the call site, and that helps you to avoid providing passwords. So in your application, if you do not want to have a password based authentication, then you can turn on this service too. But so far our concern is to check about email and password, so toggle on this and click on save. That's it. Now we are good to go. So let's head over to Android Studio now. So now as we are back in Android Studio, so let's check out the changes that we have done so far on this project. So first of all, head over to build.gradle and add this dependency. So that's nothing but, if you rewind a bit, then you may see the page where it was giving us the plugin ID, class path, etc., etc. So instead of class path, you have to provide plugins. So you can write ID, provide this plugin, then the version. This is exactly same as what you have seen in front of class path. Then apply false. That's it. Second change is head over to another build.gradle, and to this plugin add the plugin ID. Well, this plugin ID is exactly same as what you see here. So you can even copy and paste from here. The only difference here is that you need to provide version, and to this place you do not need to provide any version. The next thing was to add Firebase BOM, then the analytics. Well, the prime reason of adding Firebase BOM is that now for any other service of Firebase, for example, not just analytics, if I add say Crashlytics, Firestore, authentication, for any of these services, I need not have to provide the version name. For example, for this material 3, you can see that we have version 1.1.orc1. For activity compose, you can see that we have version 1.6.0. For core KTX, we have version 1.9.0. But now if you check about this Firebase Analytics dependency, then we haven't provided any version to this. That's because it will fetch the appropriate version using this Firebase BOM. And the final thing is Google services.json. So let me switch from Android to project. Here we have app directory, And inside this app directory, we can see Google services.json. That's most important file. If you miss this, then Firebase services is not going to work. So with 3 steps, we have now configured Firebase to our application. First was to add plugin, second to add dependency, and third, in this app directory, have this Google services.json and ensure it doesn't have any number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. etc. It should have like Google-services.json. Now let me again switch back to Android structure. Okay, so far we do not have the dependency added for Firebase authentication. So let's add the Firebase authentication dependency too. Well, the Firebase authentication service is this one, com.google.firebase:firebase-auth. So we are good with this so far. So let's sync this project. Let's create a repo now. For that, let me have a repo package. Inside this, let me create an object, say Firebase Auth, so that I can put all Firebase authentication related stuffs in this repository. Now here, let's add a function for login. Well, when user is trying to log in, the two information that user will provide is username and password. Username in our case is an email ID. Also, we'll need Firebase Auth because on this we are going to call the APIs to authenticate the user. So we can say Firebase Auth dot sign in with email and password. We have so many other options here too, like sign in with credentials, sign in with custom tokens, sign in with email link. What we are so far interested in is sign in with email and password. That's the place where you have to provide username, comma, password. And then you can say add on complete listener. Now if this task is successful, then you can return something else, return failure, that there's some issue, it's unable to sign in with email and password. Well, to provide result from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a higher order function. Let me say this as on success on failure. Now inside this is successful, let's call on success, and here let's say on failure. So it may have an exception, so let's get this exception back at the call site. So let this higher order function to accept exception as a parameter which is of null type. Well, another widely used convention is that if you don't want to use in this way, then you can create a mutable state object and return the value using that. For example, you can say user auth status let this be mutable state of. So mutable state flow, provide some value, say null, and even the type too. So let's say about the boolean of nullable type. Then in case of success, you may say user auth dot value equals to true. In case of failure, you may say something like false. Well, you can proceed with any of the approach, and then later on you also need to return this user auth status. So return state flow object. So any of the approach works well. Either you follow the first one or the second one. So let me proceed with the first approach itself. I'm not going to add any of this. So we have a very straightforward mechanism. In case of success, we call success higher order function. In case of failure, we call the failure higher order function. In a similar fashion, if I want the user to create account, so let me see this sign up. Again, we'll have username, password. So we'll need the Firebase Auth 2. Now we can say Firebase Auth dot create user with email and password. It's a place where you can provide username, password, and on complete listener. Again, it can either end up with success or failure. So again, using any of the two mentioned approach earlier, either higher order function or by using mutable state of, you can provide result back to the view model. So again, let me use higher order function. I'll say on success, on failure. Now here I can say on success, here I can say on failure, hit dot exception. Okay, so we are good so far. We have two methods in this Firebase Auth repo. One is for login, another for sign up. So let's create a view model now. For that, let's have another package. Let's say this as view model. Now inside this, let's create auth view model. So this should extend view model. So inside this, what we can do is that we can say fun perform login. Now inside this, let's call the Firebase Auth dot login. Well, Firebase Auth also have the same name in the Firebase SDK. As you can see, this Firebase Auth, which comes through Firebase Auth dot Firebase Auth. So let's change the name for this. Instead of Firebase Auth, let's say this as Firebase Auth repo. Now we can say Firebase Auth repo dot login. Now inside this login, we need to provide three parameters: Firebase Auth, username, and password. So let's create Firebase Auth object first. We'll say private val Firebase Auth equals to Firebase Auth dot get instance. Then let's provide Firebase Auth to this login method. Also, let's get username and password from the user. So we can say username and then password. The two higher order functions that we had, so let's call those things too: on success, on failure, and we are good. So we have created this method inside view model, and we are going to call perform login from our composable. In a similar fashion, if you want to perform, say, sign up, then let me say this as create account. It again requires username, password. So I can say Firebase Auth repo dot sign up. It requires Firebase Auth, username, password, then our two higher order function on success, on failure. That's it. Well, the only thing that you have to remember is that inside this view model, whatever function that you write, your prime objective most of the time is to call those functions either from the UI component, that's like on a button click, or if it's a private function, then inside this view model you can reuse those functions any number of times. So this is the place where your UI interact with the view model interact with repo gives you result back, and as repo gives result back, then using this view model you get the result back to the composable. So far what we have done is we are going to call this method from composable using this view model object, and we are going to get either on success or on failure result. So one cycle we have completed. That means trying to call and get the result of either on success, on failure through this view model. The second cycle is repo to view model to composable. So repo to view model, our higher order function is providing details. But how can we read this data, that whatever we are going to get from success or on failure, back to a composable? So for that, we are going to use mutable state flow. But in order to pass result back to the composable, let's maintain a state 2. Like if it is on success, we do not need anything, but in case of on failure, we need the exception message. So whenever these things is there where you have to maintain multiple status, the best thing is to use sealed class. Say for example, we can have sealed class of user login status, and inside this, say we can have object successful and class failure, which can accept exception value. So here now let's create mutable state flow object. So we'll say user login status equals to mutable state flow, where the type will be user login status, which accepts null value 2, and let's give the default value as null. Now let's have val user login status, this time with no underscore, and then underscore user login status dot as state flow. So the basic difference between both of them is on this underscore user login status object, it's of mutable stateflow type, so I can set and read value from this object. User login status is of stateflow type. That means I can only read the value, but I cannot set the value. So we are going to expose this object, not this, to our composable. Now in case of on success, let me say this as underscore login status dot value equals to user login status dot successful. In case of failure, let's say this as user login status dot value equals to user login status dot failure, and let's provide the exception as a parameter. That's it. And whatever you have seen so far for login, same will continue for the sign up too. So far we have seen how to create view model, call our repo, get the result from our repo to this view model, then using this object which we are setting to state flow object, we are going to read the value whenever state of this mutable state flow changes. So that means instead of null, whenever this is assigned with user login status dot successful, we'll get the result back in our composable. In a similar way, if this gets executed dot failure, then again using this object we are going to get this result back to the composable. So now let's try to link this view model with our composable. So for that, let's head over to login.kt. Here we are getting the click for sign in and sign up. Our prime focus as of now is sign in. So when user taps on this sign in button, this will get triggered, and this is providing result back to the login composable. So let's have our view model object defined as a parameter for this function. So let's say this as auth view model colon auth view model equals to view model. Now equal to view model, that is available through this library. So you need to add Android X dot lifecycle colon lifecycle hyphen view model hyphen compose colon version is 251. You can specify whatever is the latest version. So that method comes up because of this library. Okay, now the next thing is we need to call sign in whenever user press on sign in button. So when user clicks on sign in, this lambda will get triggered. So let's say auth view model dot perform login. That's the place where you have to provide the username and password. That's it. With this, we have added the Firebase login mechanism to our application. But we are not yet done completely. Because when we call perform login, then it will validate the user. Repo will give result either on success or on failure. We are also setting the result to the mutable state flow. But we are not reading the state flow object any point of time. So how do we get this information that whether user was signed in successfully or not? So for that, let's head over to the login composable once again, and let's create an object. Let's name this as user login status. So here let me say this as login status equals to auth view model dot user login status dot collect as state. Well, soon there will be a new version of this connect as state with lifecycle, and that is something which you should use. So that library is still in alpha. So if you want to use the alpha library, you can certainly use, then instead of using collect as state, it will be like collect as state with lifecycle or something related to lifecycle. So that's an optimized version of using collect as state. But in case you are using this set of library, then you can use collect as state. What it eventually means is that whenever value of this user login status, that means nothing but for this underscore user login status changes, it will observe the value and this object will automatically fetch that value too. So with this I can say login status dot value, and that will give me either user login status dot successful or user login status dot failure. There's also one shorthand notation to this. Instead of equal to, if you say by, then you can avoid calling dot value. This itself will give you the value. First validate. After validation, then only let the user to get authenticated, whether it's a successful login or ends up with failure. That's a secondary case. In case of any error, say for example if username is wrong, then you can either provide error message right below the text, and for that I have also created a video, so I'll provide link for that in the description, and also you can click on the I button on top to check out that video. The other option is you provide toast message, snack bar, or even alert dialog. But alert dialog is really not the preferred solution as it blocks the UI. So alert dialog is good in case if this perform login fails, then it is okay. But until unless this username and password which you are validating even before performing login, it's very straightforward. You can either show toast, snack, or the best among all option is show the message right below the editable field. That means you have this username, and right below this username show your error message in red color. Let this entire box go red in color. And how to do that? For that we have direct support in material theme 1.1.0, which is currently in the version. So check out that video to get more about this, that how to show error message right below the table field, and also this will make your entire box to go red too. This comes by default. Well, the second thing which we still need to consider is what should we do with login status. Well, with login status you can check out if it is success, then head over to the next screen, and if it is failure, then show, say, alert message to the user that either username or password is wrong. So for that, what we can do is we can have a check here. If login status is equals to, now it can have a value of user login status dot successful, then do something else, but we also have one more condition which we have defined before, that it may also have a null value. So we need to have an else if. But whenever you get this else if else ladder, the best alternative of this is to use when. So we'll say when login status, we'll delete this if else if, then just right click and click on add remaining branches. That's it. So in case of failure, you will get this callback. In case of success, you get this, and in case of null, which is the default value, you will come to this place. Let's handle the two cases now, for failure and success. Well, for failure, we are going to say where show failed dialog, and we'll say this is by remember mutable state of false. So what it eventually means is that whenever it ends up with failure, we can set this to true, and we can have a condition here, show dialog. Whenever it is true, that's the place where you can have your logic, either showing alert dialog, then snack, toast, or some text on UI. Among all those approaches, the best approach which suits the need here is this, because in case when username and password ends up with failure, then it blocks the entire UI by showing alert dialog at the center, and it asks user to perform some action like click on OK, cancel. So this takes away the focus of the user, which it should take, because user is entering their wrong username and password. Snack bar, toast, or text on UI. Well, snack bar and toast is really not a good candidate for showing this kind of error messages. Text on UI, yes, it can be a solution, but the major concern with text on UI is that there is very high probability that user will miss out that some text got changed on UI until and unless you handle it very well. In case of success, we have to navigate to the next screen. So generally, we have a navigator. On this navigator, we call the navigate method. But for that, we need to pass navigator to this login composable. Instead of doing that, let's take this as a higher order function. On successful login, so this we can write at this place. So eventually what it means is that login will get called through that nav host graph. So there we'll have that compose method where we'll call this login composable. That's the place where we will also have an access over nav controller too. So instead of passing nav controller to the login composable, there at that place itself, whenever this gets triggered, we can directly call navigator.navigate, say home screen or dashboard screen, whatever the composable that you want to call. So let's check out how well it is working, or if it is even working or not. Well, here we are with sign in. Nothing happens here because we haven't done anything as of now. We are not showing any messages on the UI, and also perform login. Altogether we don't have the account so far. So let's create a dummy account first. So let's head to auth view model, and as soon as this is called, let's create an account. Well, it's just a patchwork, so do not try this out. Say, let me write like this. It's again a dummy email ID and password. Let me say this as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. A very strong password. Okay, so let me run this once again. So as this runs up for the first time, it will create an account for me. Next time I'll rerun by deleting this code base. Okay, so by this time it should have created my account because I have put this inside init, and init gets executed as soon as this class is called. Now the next thing that I should do is to call perform login. So let's delete this now. But also to check out whether our login is success or not, so let's add a toast message as of now. For toast, we'll need context. So let's say val local context equals to local context dot current, and then instead of writing this over and over, let's create a function. So let me say this as private fun on the context. So it's an extension function. Show toast and ask for the message. Here let's write toast dot make text. Context is this message, and then length for the toast. So toast dot length short finally. Now let's add this toast for all these places. If username is blank, that means user haven't entered anything and clicked on sign in button. Okay, we'll also need to pass on this local context. So let's say this as enter your username. Again, do not use toast for this, rather use error field for the text field. So this is just for the demonstration, and same goes true for the password too. Let's say this as enter your password, and then in case of success or failure, altogether with the logic we are going to handle in a different way that purely depends on the app logic. how do you handling the failure or the success result. But again, just to show whether we are seeing the success or failure, so let's add toast here. Unable to log in. Then here we'll say login successful. Okay, so let's run and check this out now. Well, before I even proceed with the correct username or password so as to show the toast messages, the final thing which I want you to focus on, the position of this when condition. Is this correct or not? So let's check out this. We have login composable. Inside it we have all these objects where we have username, password, they are having states. Login status also have state, and even show field dialog have state. That means when any of these changes, this function will re-execute itself. So with such scenario, is it wise to have when condition outside any of the places? Like we have login, and directly inside login we have this when condition. Well, I've intentionally added it to this place so as to show that what happens when you write a validation condition directly outside any of the composables or some side effects which can only run once or runs based on some key value. But here that's not going on. We have when, and this when will get executed every time when this login gets recomposed. Let's check this out. So let me do one thing. Let me provide some fake username and password. So as I'm writing this password or the username combination, you may see that a toast message is appearing all the time. Why is that? That's because this is getting executed that many number of times. For a single character change, it will recompose the composable. This gets executed. Whatever is the login status, based on that, that will run that many number of time too. So what should we do now? So with this you have seen the major constraint that you cannot put condition through that you are handling your UI element without any support of a key which gives you consistency that even though this function recomposed, do not run this block. So what should we do now? Because we really do not want to show a toast message of unable to log in every time when user types any character. So the ideal situation for this is to put this inside launched effect. So let's use launched effect. We'll provide some key here, and inside this let's have this. So what it means is that whenever key value changes, then it will execute this block of code, otherwise it will not execute this, even though this composable is getting recomposed say so many number of time. It really doesn't matter much. Let's check this out. Now let's try to provide a username. And password, let's provide some password, a random password. Now let's try to sign in. Well, it shows unable to log in, which is fair enough because we have provided the wrong username and wrong password. Let's provide the correct username and password. And you can see that we are no longer seeing that toast message over and over because we have put this inside launched effect with the condition, because we have a key, that whenever login status changes, then only execute the launched effect, otherwise ignore it. So let's say this is pankaj.rai@gmail.com, which is a fake email ID, but that should do the work for us. And let's provide the password 12345678 then click on login. Here we see login successful. But one more thing here is that the email ID that you are seeing there is not my email ID. And just in this way itself, there could be so many users who may create an account for your application with some invalid email ID. Can you keep track of those things? Yes, you can do that, because Firebase Auth object also provides you an ability to check if that user is validated with the email ID or not. If it returns false, that means user email ID is not validated. So generally what you should do is that when user creates an account, create with username and password, then use another method to send the email verification link. Once user clicks on that, it validates the user that this user is the genuine user. And then next time onward, when user logs in, Firebase Auth will give you the email verified as true. So that's it for this video, where I've talked about how you can add Firebase authentication for your user, and especially the login part of it. So to recap this, we have login. Inside login, we have login status. Through that, we are checking whether the login is successful or failed. That we are doing inside launched effect with a key provided as login status. Then for the button click sign in, we are checking if username is blank or not, password is blank or not. If we say that yes, this is not matching up, that means username have value, password does have value, then using the view model, we are performing login. Perform login is success or failed is returned through this login status. Because we have called collect as state, it means that it already sets an observer whenever user login status changes. This will get the updated value by default, so that later on here inside this launched effect we can take appropriate action. So that's it for this. If you have liked this video, then please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe this channel. Thank you and stay tuned.